I think this is kind of the smoking gun here, at least for Rachel Zegler. Is like, you can't be doing this. As a professional, you cannot do this. You dragged your personal politics, you pushed a personal agenda. This is where it became problematic. I think I see it now. Love that. Oh my god. Chernobyl. Okay, I don't care what you say. Hear me out. The B movie is fantastic. I don't care what you say. You're kind of not wrong. You're kind of not wrong.
Hollywood, baby. Weird.
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 She actually, like, I think cooked this movie, chat. Okay,
Disney
well,
was
let's check
warned
this
for
out. How an entitled no-name actor destroyed a Disney classic. Well, let's take a look, guys. I'm very interested in this particular one. So,
Linda
because I
Carter
don't
was
know
a
much about
better
this
Wonder
movie.
Woman anyway.
That's so true.
Disney was warned for years that their live-action remake of Snow White would be an abysmal failure.
Well, like most live actions for Disney, but besides Beauty and the Beast and maybe like Maleficent, like those are pretty good. But a lot of them are just kind of like, they kind of fell short, right?
They ignored the warnings and instead made every wrong decision possible, leading to a box office bomb. Theaters around the world are empty. The film sold 50% less than they projected. It earned a 1.6 out of 10 star rating on.
I mean, that is just abysmal, chap. Sonic 3, I still top Mufasa. That says a lot. I think one thing you got to remember about that, though, is like Mufasa didn't do very well in the US, but it did really, really well, of course, overseas. So something to remember that. Yeah, something to remember that that is not the right button.
IMDb, a 20% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The CGI dwarves will give you night.
They look so bad. Look. Look at this, chat. They look so bad. Like, what the Who thought that after they finished, like, outputting this, that this was like, oh, this looks good?
Nightmares and the little people they replaced with CGI have filed a class action lawsuit against Disney. Walt Disney himself is turning in
crazy.
his grave because he personally requested that the company should never change, alter, or remake Snow White.
I actually did not know that. I mean, I assume that, that's his baby, right? That is what essentially put Disney on the map. So I'm sure that he is probably losing it.
But they did it anyway by casting Rachel Zegler, who insisted that they change the entire film to make it more politically correct. Rachel called the original Prince Charming a stalker, insisted that Snow White was not yearning for love, but actually dreamed of being a leader. Rachel also demanded she be paid more for, quote, standing in a dress for 18 hours.
Isn't that part of like filming? Like, don't you, as an actor, actress, like that's the hard part of it. You have to do these really, really long hours to meet deadlines and stuff like that. Like, isn't that just normal? Like, first off, the prince isn't a stalker. Like, that's not even true. Second off, you're like adding between the lines of what you think something should be when it's not necessarily that way at all. Like, I mean, I understand wanting to update it to be more modern, but why are you applying like some kind of intention that was never in the movie or the book, the story itself? You know what I mean? Like the OG books are creepy, but remember, like we're not talking about the books. We're talking about the movie, right?
Zegler created so much controversy that Disney had to hire a personal security detail for her co-star Gal Gadot because of the countless death threats she was receiving.
I mean, that's unacceptable. I don't care like how bad they did in a movie or something like that. That should not be a thing.
The movie is an absolute dumpster fire, and Rachel's response to the film bombing proved that everyone's suspicions about her were correct.
Again, I don't know much about what we're about to look at, right? Like, I know a little bit about what happened in the movie, so that's why I'm very interested in this particular video, because I want to learn more about it.
I'm a narcissist.
And yet none of that has anything to do with why people were suspicious about Rachel Zegler in the first place. In 2018, Rachel's friend sent her a tweet about an open casting call for Steven Spielberg's film adaptation of West Side Story. So 16-year-old Zegler recorded and submitted an audition tape.
Bernardo and Anita argue all morning about
about a fight that's gonna happen tonight?
Now, she was definitely a promising young talent. She spent her childhood acting in countless plays and developed an impressive singing voice. Rachel was just one of 30,000 who auditioned for the role of Maria. Without any professional acting experience, an agent, or connections in Hollywood, she was selected for the lead role.
Oh, I think I dropped something down here. What is this? Oh my god, it's a subscribe button. Wow. Well, since we're here, guys, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. It helps me a ton. Okay, back to the video. She has a really good voice, chat. You can't take that away from her. She has an incredible voice, you know what I mean?
Performance earned critical acclaim, and she went on to win the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Motion Picture, or Comedy. The industry playing
I didn't know that. Holy shit.
Because some people simply do not believe that a no-name actor could get this lucky.
I mean, I will say it seems like she was very on the up and up, right? So that might be why Disney ultimately went with her. But that is a bit of a risk that you take doing this kind of stuff because you don't really know how the person is, right? And ultimately, it turns out that she was kind of...
She was basically hand-selected by Steven Spielberg. Then again, with the entertainment industry being flooded with Nepo babies and people born into immense wealth, Rachel being essentially a random girl from New Jersey securing an A-list role actually might be a step in the right direction for Hollywood.
Yeah, I agree with that.
They may have chose the wrong.
It should be a focus more on the talent in itself. It should be a focus on what they can do rather than the nepotism. Nepo baby, nepotism.
Girl, because her inability to keep her politically charged opinions to herself started to cause problems.
So this is where I kind of like came into the talk about this because this is what I saw where she was doing her political opinions and stuff like that. And I feel like you can be an activist and share your political opinions, but in a more reserved and responsible way. Remember, if you're working with Disney or anybody that's really, really big, you're working for somebody that once you do something, it's going to reflect on them. So you have to think about that kind of stuff, right?
For Disney executives. As if West Side Story wasn't already a massive introduction to Hollywood, her next role was even bigger, one that could set her up for a lifetime of success, and that was being cast as Snow White in Disney's live-action remake of the classic. Rachel chose to make this monumental announcement on Twitter where she wrote, "Yes, I am Snow White. No, I am not bleaching my skin for the role." Rachel deleted this tweet shortly after sending it out to the world. However, the reason she brought up her skin color in the first place was to address the criticism she was receiving online. In the original fairy tale and the 1937 animated film, Snow White is depicted as having skin as white as snow. It is quite literally the inception of the
I remember that,
identity.
Savage.
But Rachel Zegler is of Colombian descent.
I mean, I don't have a problem with this, to be honest. You know what I mean? Like, I have no problem with the casting. I'm sure some people are going to be, like, curious about it, but I don't think that's a problem, personally, at least for me. I know some people are going to be like, oh, well, she's Snow White, she's not pale, but to be honest, like, do you have to? No, I think it's okay.
And has more of an olive skin tone. Now, there definitely were some extreme takes, suggesting that Disney is evil and only casting POC characters to cause outrage. There were also some blatantly racist takes, but most people were just genuinely confused why Snow White wasn't going to be white, and this does seem to be a recurring theme for
I mean, again, I do think that iconically, right, her skin is white as snow, like you said, a giant ebony hair, cheeks, and lips, blood from birth. So, like, I get it from a visual standpoint, right? Like, if you're looking from the outside in, she's not Snow White, literally. So I do get that and why people might be confused by that. Ultimately, I don't have a problem with it, but I do think that, you know, I think that Disney does have to take into consideration if you're going to go in a different direction than that. That is something that you'd have to consider, but ultimately, I think it's okay.
For Disney these days. The original 1989 animation of The Little Mermaid depicted Ariel as a white woman, whereas the 2023 live-action remake cast Halle Bailey as Ariel, who is African American. And yes, this film was also accused of pandering, trying to change something that was a non-issue in the first place.
I mean, again, I don't have an issue with that either.
However, defenders
I felt like there was no problem with that.
Mermaids don't have a race because they are not real. Normally, these controversies lead to failure, but the film grossed over $560 million worldwide and made a solid profit. But Zegler insisted that the Snow White remake was based on an alternative version of the story.
Yeah, no, at the end of the day, Fox, there's no reason to be racist, period. I would bajillion 1,000% agree with that, you know?
one that doesn't have to do with her skin
And
color.
plus, all these stories are like, fantasy. They're old, right? Like, if there's any cartoon, that is the decision that they made then. Maybe it should be updated, and that's okay to have that conversation, you know what I mean?
She said, it fell back to another version of Snow White that was told in history, where she survived a snowstorm that occurred when she was a baby, and so the king and queen decided to name her Snow White to remind her of her resilience. One of the core points in our film for any young woman or young person is remembering how strong you actually are. And while this may seem like a small nuance that doesn't really matter in the grand
I mean, again, I'm okay with
scheme
that.
of things,
I'm okay with that.
into the major changes that were coming.
If you're a good actor, actress, and it's not like absolutely just destroying or breaking the role, I see no problem with this,
Next, because the more Zegler talked about the film, the more it seemed like it was going to be a disaster, particularly in this Variety interview where
I mean, I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the fact if they did good in the movie, and obviously the things that they're being accused of being a bad human being, right? So let's
she
look.
talked about how she and the writers are giving Snow White a modern twist.
You said you were bringing a
Which is
modern
okay.
edge to it.
In all honesty, I would expect that, especially like with the live action Beauty and the Beast. Live action Beauty and the Beast did have a modern adaptation, modern twist, modern updates, and that was a banger. We love live action Beauty and the Beast. They did a great job with that. Little Mermaid worked as well. That was awesome too. So you know what? I'm okay with that. Just don't fundamentally change the fucking character in the story,
What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely
Of course.
wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be
yeah.
saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince. She's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Snow
But the whole point of Snow White in the original Disney movie is she's saved by the prince. You know what I mean? Like, why do we need to change that? I understand certain bullet points can be changed and certain parts can be updated, but yeah, the whole theme of the movie is true love. So why are we like trying to adjust that? You know what I mean? Like, where in the original movie was Snow White trying to be a leader? You know what I mean? It just feels like you're looking at the source material and you're just like, yeah, no, this.
a leader, why not write a totally new story instead of remaking the old ones? It has nothing to do with Snow White. Zegler, there is nothing wrong with dreaming about true love. But people were not overreacting in the comments. Zegler supported stripping this classic story of its roots.
I feel like in a way that kind of sucks as, as a little girl that watched this all take place, right? Like as watching the original Snow White, having that dream of like true love, like I'm going to find my prince, right? Like that's not a bad thing for somebody to have that hope and that want, right? Like I'm thinking back to when I was a little girl, having that hope to find your true love, like that's an inspiring message. There's nothing wrong with that message, So why are we taking it away,
I mean, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
What?
Weird.
What?
Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Rachel's tone might come off silly to some, but it is evidently so sarcastic. Referring to Prince Charming as a stalker is inaccurate and disrespectful. We are not talking about just any Disney film. We are talking about the first ever full-length animated feature film in history.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I'm saying. This is such an important film to all of filmography, for all of culture. I mean, like, for you to try to take away from that is crazy to me.
This is quite literally Walt Disney's baby.
Yep.
Now, people are already a little apprehensive towards the countless remakes of old Disney classics, but Rachel's lack of class and grace pushed anyone who was even a little open-minded away. Despite that, she continued to express her disdain for the original film.
I was scared of the original cartoon. Like, I'm being so serious. I watched it once, never revisited Snow White again.
I mean, I'll be honest. I could see that with the fourth section. That part is very scary. So to be fair, like in a very devil's advocate way, that part in the middle of the movie is very scary. So I could see that. Everything I've heard from her, I kind of disagree with as far as like her takes on the original movie. But anyway, let's see, What's
interesting about Rachel claiming to be scared of the original film is that she also said the exact opposite during her press tour, showing pictures of her as a child in her Snow White dress and how she always dreamed as a little girl of being this princess. This constant flip-flopping along with her sarcastic tone just just soured people's perception of her. But not only did she seem unappreciative of a Disney classic, some interesting comments about her next role as Anthea in Shazam! Fury of the Gods.
What made you want to step into this world of DC heroes?
That movie was kind of bad.
Needed a job. I'm being so serious.
While yes, even actors have bills to pay and need a job to do that, some interpreted the remark as snarky and annoying. Now, to be fair, later in the interview, Rachel does go on to express...
Jim Carrey said the exact same thing. He's like, well, it came back because of money. So, like, you know what I mean? This is nothing. This is nothing.
Her gratitude for receiving this role, considering it was only her second Hollywood film ever. But her unapologetic attitude on the red carpet continued to stir the pot, and she just kept making it worse, specifically during the writer's strike of 2023. The Writers Guild of America represents...
He's a comedian, though. I mean, why can't she be? You know what I mean?
Thousands of writers in
that's
film,
a little,
TV, radio,
reaching.
and online media. They are the backbone of Hollywood's content. Despite their importance, Hollywood executives restructured the industry to drastically reduce residual payments, leaving most writers with little to no income after their work is uploaded to apps like Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, etc. So the guild went on a strike to renegotiate and push for higher pay. Rachel Zegler also used her voice to support the strike.
Often, it's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah, sure. And she's young, maybe I mean, I can't say much. I think I'm about the same age as her, but I think that maybe she didn't understand her tone, maybe. But nonetheless, like, I think she's just being silly. That's the way I look at it. So far, I don't really like the way that she comes across as undermining the original story. I'm not a fan of that.
If I'm going to stand there 18 hours in a dress of an iconic Disney princess, I deserve to be paid for every hour that it is streamed online.
She's like everything people hate about this generation distilled into a single person. At this point, I'm sure you are noticing a pattern. While we hope that deep down Rachel's intentions are pure, and we hope that she truly is just trying to have an overall positive impact on the world, she has a terrible way of expressing her opinions, as her tone often comes off as disrespectful. Having 2 movies under her belt and already aggressively demanding higher pay came off extremely entitled.
I mean, I think you should get paid for the work you do, you know, like, that's not really controversial, you know, like, you should get paid for the work you do, but tonality is important when you're sharing a message, so I think there's an argument on both sides of that. I'm gonna shelf that one.
Considering the strike was mostly for writers, because main characters, like Zegler, are often compensated extremely generously. By this point, her reputation was at an all-time low, and there were even rumors circulating that Disney was going to axe this film, as countless people expressed that Rachel Zegler is the sole reason that they would not go to watch the movie. But then somehow, Disney managed to make things even worse. They announced that they would be—
What? Disney makes things worse?
Changing Snow White's 7 dwarves to the more politically correct Snow White's diverse group of magical creatures of all sizes and genders. Photos of the cast were leaked onto the internet, which sparked outrage. These look like medieval times reenactors at the local fair. Disney quickly responded and said that these were not pictures of the actual set, but nobody believed them. The only reason Disney planned on changing the dwarves in the first place was because of a comment made by Hollywood star Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, this was the other part where I was kind of like, what's going on with this? Because you guys were telling me there was some stuff that he said, but I don't know what it was exactly, so let's keep watching because I want to learn.
Who felt that the new rendition of the movie was not progressive enough.
I was a little taken back by the they're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White.
Yeah.
But you're still telling the story of Snow White.
Yeah.
7 dwarfs.
Sure.
So you take a step back and look at what you're doing there.
Yeah.
I know. That makes no sense to me.
But,
you're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of 7 dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man?
Even though Peter Dinklage has built an illustrious Hollywood legacy with countless roles as a little person, he really seemed pretty upset with Disney. They promptly responded that they would avoid reinforcing stereotypes and would be consulting with members of the dwarfism community to make the 7 characters more inclusive. Most people just looked at this as Disney once again pandering to another social issue, but what often happens when trying to please everyone for the sake of being politically correct, you end up pleasing no one.
What they're doing.
That's very true. That's very true. Like you can only pander so much, right? I get wanting to be respectful, right? There's got to be a balance with anything we do, chat. We have to be respectful of other people, right? Making a movie, whatever it is, right? I don't know his intention behind those lines. I think that him saying, we're being progressive with Snow White is good. We need to be more respectful of the actors. I think is always a conversation ab. I'm not the person to solve that problem. I don't know. I'm not a, political commentator, things like that. I don't know the answer to that. I'm kind of going to shelf that. I'm going to let you guys, share your opinions on that, but I'm not the person to really, solve that for anybody. You know what I mean?
It's pretty much you're replacing jobs that people could have as little people. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, it's for dwarfs.
Disney was panicking for a solution.
I mean, like, at the same time, like, when you do CGI, you are giving people jobs to make the CGI, but you're also taking away from real actors that could be doing those roles, right? So, like, I think there's an argument on both sides, right? Like, you want to be progressive and you don't want to reinforce stereotypes, and also, like, you can help other people obtain a role that can help them in their life and their jobs and things like that. So, it's a tough decision to make, right? I don't know if there's a right answer. Again, I'm not the almighty being that can answer these huge, very in-depth political situations and social situations, but ultimately, we have to see how the rest of this played out. I mean, I feel like, for me, like, I think real actors are gonna make it visually better, right? But at the same time, if it's reinforcing a stereotype, I can understand people, wanting to go away from that. So,
and to make both sides happy, and nobody could have predicted how bad.
Right, it's just like very much, it's like a cluster. Exactly. Like, if they're gonna make this movie, and they were sitting down, and they said, we're gonna make this movie, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, right? Maybe Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs just never needed to be a live action movie. If they're so concerned with being politically correct, but helping, making it CGI. But then there's the other side of it where they're taking away from people's jobs and, roles and stuff like that. Maybe this just needed to be not a live action movie. At the end of the day, sometimes it's okay to look at this and go, you know what? This ain't it. This just ain't it. Just don't make it because you're not going to be correct. Like, again, I'm telling you about this dwarf stuff. I really see both sides of it, very much so. And I don't really have an opinion on what's right because I'm not informed enough to have an opinion on it. But what I will say is, coming from the outside in, I really feel like this is just one of those situations where it would have been better to be like, you know what? Just don't make the movie. It's going to be too much of a problem,
Their solution to this problem would be, instead of casting real actors, Disney decided to eliminate them and use CGI dwarves instead. Provide enough nightmare fuel to last you the rest of 2025. The dwarves look like scary monsters.
They look bad. At the end of the day, the end product of this, it looks bad. You know what I mean? Whatever you want to say about the moral argument of both sides, this looks bad.
Not cute, charming friends. The overuse of CGI in this film allowed them to take shortcuts. Instead of creating detailed artistic sets and costumes, they relied on animation, which made the film feel cheap, hollow, and soulless. Like, wasn't this supposed to be a live action remake? Where's the live action? Why is there so much CGI? Why does it
I mean, again, it's like the Lion King live action. Like, what the
like a really bad cartoon. Additionally, the significance of the dwarves to the story was drastically reduced. Grumpy and Dopey got a decent amount of screen time, while the other 5 dwarves were barely shown enough for the viewers to be able to distinguish them from one another.
I haven't seen the film, so I can't say much about this, but to be fair, in the original, the focus is on Doc, Grumpy, and Dopey, and that's it. The rest of them are just kind of like, they exist, to be fair.
Ironically, all of these decisions were made to avoid backlash from the dwarfism community, and now the little people who were removed from the film are now planning a class action lawsuit against Disney.
This whole situation about that, I don't think anybody's gonna win, right? If you do one thing, it's that happens. If you do the other thing happens, So, like, what is correct there? In all honesty, I don't think there is a correct answer.
For replacing them with cartoons. This is so ridiculous. Actress Allie Chapman, who is 3 foot 8 inches tall, said, 7 talented little people actors could have played these roles in the live-action remake, and yet they chose to use cartoons. It's an insult and discriminatory.
And again, that goes against what Peter Dinklage said earlier, right? So I'm not in that community. I can't really comment on it. But there you go. At least you get to see both sides.
You ever see one of those tragic situations where it's extremely foggy and there's a traffic jam on the highway and you have cars speeding into the fog, just crashing into each other? That is this film. And surely
literally,
it couldn't get any worse, right? Wrong, because now there was a major dispute between the two stars of the film, Gal Gadot and Rachel Zegler. Fans noticed sometime between 2023 and 2024 that Gal and Rachel may have developed some tension. As you can see in this interview, Gal is being professional, looking and smiling while Zegler is speaking.
That's true,
But
Mullen.
whenever Gal is speaking, Zegler refuses to look at her, often looking down at her feet or off to the side. Their body language screams that there is tension between them, and
This is a nothing burger, chat. This is a nothing burger. Now, I think if I was the movie producer, chat, I think that I would have cast actual actors because I feel like it would make the film look better, right? To have that actual acting between the actors and actresses, the interpersonal stuff. That's the way that I would go. You know, all the moral arguments and stuff aside.
and these assumptions would be
Yeah, this is a nothing burger, by the way, chat. This is a absolute nothing burger.
proven true. When Disney released the official trailer for Snow White, Rachel thanked the fans for their support, receiving over 120 million views in 24 hours.
You guys
She
definitely
used
lame.
that big moment to make a political statement. And
No, it's
always
not. It's not,
remember,
Saber.
Free Palestine. While some saw this as an honorable act of solidarity, others interpreted it as a jab at her co-star. Gal Gadot is Israeli and even served in their military. Gal has been outwardly supportive of her country, specifically posting support for the IDF
Oh, I didn't know
and
this.
civilian hostages taken during the October 7th Hamas attack. Almost immediately, Gal began getting a concerning amount of death threats. Things got so bad that Disney had to hire a personal security
Oh, this is where a lot of the controversy comes from. Okay, now I get it. This explains a lot more of the issues.
detail for Gaddit.
This
One
took
of
a
the Disney
turn.
producers, Mark Platt, flew from Los Angeles to New York to have a personal crisis talk with Zegler.
Oh,
Platt
wow.
had to remind her how much was at stake with the movie and her career before asking her to post heedfully. The son of the Disney producer was criticized online for his father trying to reprimand Zegler, to which he responded, "Yeah, my dad, the producer of an enormous piece of Disney IP with hundreds of millions of dollars on the line, had to leave his family to fly across the country to reprimand his 20-year-old employee for dragging her personal politics into the middle of promoting the movie for which she signed a multi-million-dollar contract to get paid and do publicity for."
I think this is kind of the smoking gun here, at least for Rachel Zegler. It's like, you can't be doing this. As a professional, you cannot do this. You dragged your personal politics, you pushed a personal agenda. This is where it became problematic. I think I see it now. There was no reason for her to push a personal agenda, you know what I mean? Especially as a professional and you're working for Disney, it's very immature. You are a professional working on a film as an actress. It is completely unacceptable for you to do that as a professional. If you are in your workplace, right, do you push your political thoughts on your coworkers? Of course you don't do that, right? Because that's unprofessional. You can have that discussion with somebody, outside and things like that. And you can absolutely it's your right, absolutely, but you can't mix the two.
This is called adult responsibility and accountability, and her actions clearly hurt the film's box office.
I don't know how true that is. Somebody else would have to prove that, right? But maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I don't know. I'm not ingrained enough to know. I mean, maybe there's proof. I don't know what the proof is, right?
Free speech does not mean you're allowed to say whatever you want in your private employment without repercussions.
That right there, that is the perfect line. Let me move and read this. Free speech does not mean you're allowed to say whatever you want in your private employment without repercussions. Thank you. This line right here. This is the most important line. That is the important line right there, chat. You gotta remember that.
Tens of thousands of people worked on that film, and she hijacked the conversation for her own immature desires, at the risk of all the colleagues and crew and blue-collar workers who depend on that movie to be successful.
People do get fired for less. They literally do.
Narcissism is not something
Think about
to
it
be
in your own
coddled
job.
or encouraged. Now, Rachel Zegler cannot necessarily be held responsible for the actions of other
You can say whatever you want, but it might have
people.
consequences,
After
right?
all, her and her co-star are doing the exact same thing. They are just expressing support for opposite sides. But all of this could have been avoided if they just left politics in the movie. But Zegler was insistent on making her political opinion heard at any opportunity she could.
Vote for Kamala Harris. And it's actually non-negotiable. Our rights are on the line, folks. Our reproductive rights.
Why do we put Shrek in that? By the way, why do we put Shrek in that?
Go vote blue. And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button. I don't need your business.
And what better time than immediately after the election
Oh,
of
for
President
Shrek.
Donald Trump. She posted on her Instagram story, "I find myself speechless in the midst of this. Another 4 years of hatred, leaning us towards a
Yeah, put
world I
Shrek
do
in more
not
stuff.
want to live in. Leaning us towards a world that will be hard to raise my daughter in." She doesn't have a daughter, by the way. "Leaning us towards a world that will force her to have
Okay, I
a
was like,
baby
holy
she doesn't want. Leaning us towards a world that is fearful. I shouldn't
Why
be this
is she
shocked, but
zooming
I
into a
am. I am
creepy-looking
heartbroken for my
smile?
friends
I don't know.
who awoke fear this morning, and I am here with you. To cry, to yell, to hug, to wax poetic on how the left continues to fail us in forging a new path forward. This loss should not have been, and it certainly should not have been by so many votes."
I'm sure everybody has a way that they feel about politics, and you are completely entitled how you feel about that. And that is okay. Whether you voted for this side or that side, that's fine. That is completely up to you. I think the problem that they're pointing out is, again, she is in the middle of a contract and she's doing this, right? And I don't know the specifics of the contract, but I could imagine that, being this vocal about certain stuff can cause issues, right?
May Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace. This sent the media into an all-out frenzy,
Oh, yeah, I'm
particularly
sure.
conservative media, who were
I'm
shocked
sure.
that Disney was allowing their star to publicly condemn half the country.
And that's the problem, right? Like how it reflects on Disney, you know what I mean? That's the problem. That's why you can't say that stuff when you're working for a very large corporation like that. It will always reflect poorly on them, and people will take a hold of that, So Disney doesn't own her. Yes, but she is representing their company as the main star for a very large film. You can't ignore the fact how that would reflect on Disney. That would be irresponsible for you to not look how that reflected, Sure, they don't own her, but she is also the major star of a we thought would be major film. You know what I mean? Like, it reflects poorly on them. And that's why there's contracts and all those kind of things, right? So, anyway, let's keep watching.
Hello, Disney. You're going to have to redo your film again because this woman is a pig and you fired Gina Carano for far less than this nonsense.
Yeah, calling her a pig is unnecessary.
Rachel finally crossed a line.
You know what I
Disney
mean?
was officially fed up with her and decided.
To be fair, Pink Bubble, there's a lot of politics in the whole situation, right? So it's kind of hard for it not to be politically
To
tinted.
take action. First, I'm assuming they made her apologize because she redacted her comments she made about the election.
I have no idea who that is,
Zegler
Maddie.
reportedly began working with a social media guru paid
That's
for
good.
by Disney to
That's
post
good.
before the film
That's a good thing.
March 21st debut.
Yeah, don't
They
call her a
essentially
pig,
had
though.
someone
That's fucked up.
monitoring her social media so she wasn't able to sabotage the film any further. But the damage
Oh, the lady
had
from
already
Mandalorian,
been
that's right.
done. The film officially released in theaters worldwide on March 21st, 2025. There was a slight chance that all this negative publicity would actually draw more attention to the film, increase ticket sales, and lead to a successful
that
debut.
could be.
Unfortunately for Disney, the opposite happened.
I agree,
Fans knew this movie
Tuxedo.
was going to suck way before it ever released, and no matter how many professional critics on Rotten Tomatoes are writing positive reviews, the fans have made their statement with a lack of support. And as a result, Snow White has suffered a disastrous
It's still
opening
hot
weekend.
AF. I like both.
The global box
Thanks,
office, earning only
I appreciate it.
$87.3 million worldwide, which sounds like a lot
Really,
until you
really
realize
bad.
that it had a staggering
No, really bad.
$250 million production budget.
And remember I mentioned this earlier, but I'll tell you again, chat. Normally the production budget, you gotta double it to actually kind of get a true view of how much the movie costs with advertisement, taking, stuff like that. So really, you're looking at about $500 million for when it's all said and done. So for it to take $87.3 million is disastrous, by the way.
Which some reports suggest is actually closer to $300 million after reshoots and marketing costs. That means they had a whopping 70% loss, making it one of Disney's biggest box office bombs in recent history. This performance is nearly exactly the same as The Little Mermaid. It had the same budget and had a very similar opening weekend. However, The Little Mermaid was actually a pretty good remake with
Disney's not
positive
going
reviews.
anywhere.
Fans
Like,
later decided to give the
Disney
movie
ain't going
a shot,
anywhere.
which resulted in a $569 million worldwide box office earnings. But due to the overwhelming agreement from people who actually watched the movie that it sucks, and then people straight up boycotting, I don't think Snow White's gonna get a second wind.
Yeah, it definitely
is
won't.
a bomb. And Rachel Zegler's response to the box office failure was nothing short of delusional.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her.
What?
And I can only hope that despite my flaws, and despite my cracks and my breaks, and there are many of them, that at every premiere and everything I do,
I'm just
people
confused.
will wait in line to see.
People who are
I'm just confused by what she said.
Zegler was a narcissist.
Well, what was she on about?
Have officially confirmed their feelings after seeing this statement. They suspected she was trying to make this film about her. They suspected that she did not care for the legacy of Disney and that all she wanted was the spotlight for herself.
Based on what she said about the story and stuff like that, I will agree with that statement. I don't think that she really cared much for the legacy of Disney. I agree with that. Based on what she said, right? It did feel very disrespectful to the source material. But did she ruin the movie by herself? I don't think so.
And honestly, this response makes it seem like those assumptions are now justified. But it's a confusing response because the film was a massive flop. Like, essentially, she's saying, haha, my movies are so great, you just have to line up and you have to watch them. But that's not the case. People are actually not waiting in line for this film specifically because of her. And as
some people might not want to see it because of her, but that is a very generalized statement that I don't think applies to the majority.
Easy as it is to continuously blame her for the failure of this film, it's only fair to admit that Rachel Zegler's performance was actually decent. She is a great singer, and she definitely performed well considering most of what makes the film actually
I heard opposite, but that's good to know.
Was outside of her control. Like most Disney live-action remakes, Snow White just felt a bit bland and lacked the magic of the original. The CGI looked cheap, the colors are dull and boring, the evil queen didn't feel very evil at all. These remakes often struggle to capture the same charm, making them feel like a corporate cash grab. But since Disney will lose money on this film, perhaps they won't make this same mistake going forward. But the biggest learning lesson for Disney here is that the internet outrage is not fake. When people say, hey, your main character is insufferable and I will not spend my money to see this movie,
the video you saw was made years ago. Which one?
When people say they genuinely want politics,
this one just came out. Yeah, this video was 22 hours ago.
To remain out of a children's movie, they are not lying. And when people say it's better to just invent new stories instead of alter the classics, they are not lying. The people
I agree with that. They should make just new stories. Or if you're gonna remake the original, remake it and add stuff.
The truth is, this film should have never
been
made.
They were crying,
Walt Disney himself was extremely protective of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. This was essentially his baby.
I want to go back to what I originally said before, chat. If Disney was super protective about this movie, again, I mentioned that it was his baby, right? Why did they remake it in the first place? I feel like there were so many things that if they would have sat down and talked about what we're talking about right now, they shouldn't have made this movie.
Reportedly rejected multiple ideas for sequels, including a proposed short called Snow White Returns, and was adamant that the original story should not be altered or expanded, as he believed Snow White was a standalone masterpiece that should remain untouched. And it's extremely evident that Disney should have honored their creator's one wish.
Yep. I agree with that 1 bajillion%. I agree with that. They should have honored that. So, I think here's what I want to say about this. The title, how an entitled no-name actor destroyed a Disney classic. I feel like that she didn't really respect the source material, personally, right? Did she ruin the movie by herself? Absolutely not. She was not like the one person that was just like, had all the power and ruin this movie. No, she maybe had a little bit of a hand in it, but ultimately it's Disney's fault, you know, like, yeah, she made it a little bit worse, don't get me wrong, but it's Disney's fault. And even if we want to say like, oh, you know, she threw a fit about this and that and wanted this rewritten, Disney could have said no. If that was the case, that's as a hypothetical, right? So like, I think that at the end of the day, like, whether you like her or not is fine. That's up to you. I don't really like how her commentary about the source material. I disagree with it. Obviously, she was very unprofessional. Do I think she's the worst person in the world? No. Do I think that she single-handedly ruined the movie? No. But I do think that there was some stuff she did that did not help. Yeah, I think if anything, like, I'm just indifferent towards her. You know what I mean? She's unprofessional and may or not like her, and that's fine. But I think Disney had more of a hand in a lot of their decision making that probably made this much worse at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So there you go, chat. Now we know about Snow White. I told you guys I wanted to watch this to learn because I just didn't know what the f was going on.
What's with you people?
Yeah.
Huh? I thought you were supposed to be friends.
We're supposed to be friends, chat. It's Disney's fault at the end of the day, you know? It really, really is.